As we continue our discussion on relationships, we'll kind of move into a little bit about close relationships, relationships with our families, our children, our spouses, or etc. No, friends. What purpose do friends serve? Different cultures might have a different answer for this. Well, one of the biggest things that friends can be there for is to give you advice. Now, it turns out that in some cultures that are more independent in nature, giving advice to a friend can be seen as violating their autonomy. Or, I have a great idea. Why don't you go and give parenting advice to some other parent? See how that goes, okay? See how that goes in an American context. And so you find Russian culture is much more collectivistic, and so there's less autonomy involved, more collectivistic mindsets involved. Therefore, to give advice to a friend, you're less likely to, impose upon or take from their autonomy. So they had these different online forums, parenting forums, and in these forums, these women were asking parenting advice, and the parenting advice was put out there. It was put out there in two different ways. In one was, here's this problem I have. In a second context, it was, here's this problem I have. Do you have any advice? So in one, it's the same problem, but in one case you do not explicitly ask for an advice, and in the second condition you do ask for advice. And they did this in a United States parenting forum and in a Russian parenting forum. And what they found was, if if in the U.S. forums, if you presented an issue but you did not physically, literally put, what advice do you have? Almost nobody gave any advice. Okay. But if you put the what advice do you have, about a quarter of the responses did in fact give some advice on the issue. In the Russian forums, though there was a difference with this cue, it's pretty clear that in the Russian forums they were prepared to give advice whether you asked for it or not. We find friendships from a Western perspective, we think about friendship as a positive thing, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. In using the phrases that we used in the last video, in the United States, we have an open relationship market as a general rule, which again, in the last topic was, if you're attractive, that means you have the potential to pull those strangers into your circle. But this also means that in an open relationship market, such as the United States tends to have, if one of your friends becomes an a-hole, you just boot them out, right? They're gone. And so, from an American perspective, if my kids come home from school when they were little, and we go, Johnny was mean to me. I'm like, then don't hang out with Johnny. Problem solved, right? But in cultures that have a closed relationship market, if Johnny's being you can't get rid of Johnny. You're stuck with Johnny. And so this is something that comes up in Ghana. Ghana has a very, very interdependent culture, very closed relationship market. Beware of friends. Some are snakes under grass. Some are lions in sheep's clothing. Some are jealousies behind their facades of praises. Some are just no good. Beware of friends. I'm like, are you kidding me? And so that's the whole idea, is that, even if the relationship sours, you're stuck. You're stuck with them. Kind of reminds me of the relationship with an in-law. If your relationship with your in-law sours, you're stuck. All right, I guess do the old D word, but as a rule, you're stuck as long as you stay married. And so Ghanaians report a smaller number of friends, but the Ghanaians also report more enemies. Okay. Ghanaians report having more enemies, 71% versus 26% in America. And again, like we said, enemies make no sense. You just get rid of them. You just don't interact with them. But you can't get rid of enemies in a closed relationship market. All right, when it comes to love, it turns out that this notion of romantic love appears to be true or exist in every culture that's ever been studied. 89% of subsistence societies say they have it. The other 11% probably have it, and it's probably just kind of a language barrier kind of thing, getting it out. Okay, so despite the fact that this notion of romantic love seems to exist everywhere, it doesn't seem to be the basis of a marriage in most human societies across time. So across time, the most common marriages were arranged, and in many parts of the world they still are. Okay, so we can see here, though we can talk about arranged versus love marriages, there's a large degree in this notion of arranged versus love. On this list here, we can see at the top is what I would refer to as very, very conservative. It is cultures where the parents make decisions about who you're going to marry, and you have absolutely no choice in the matter. If mom and dad say you're going to marry, you're going to marry. Okay, and you can see this is there are more women in this much more conservative layout than men. And as you move your way down the list here, it's kind of going down to more of a liberal perspective, whereas at the bottom, the most open of all, individual selects partner autonomously. I choose who I'm going to marry. Nobody has to give approval, nothing like that. And you can find far, far, far more men are in this liberal sense than women are. And so, as a general rule, women are more likely to have fewer choices in their marriage plans. Marriage is, in many ways, here's a kinship diagram, and without getting into a lot of details, it turns out in a lot of cultures, some cultures cousin marriage is forbidden. In some cultures, cousin marriage is the ideal. In some cultures, a parallel cousin is a horrible, horrible spouse, but a cross cousin is fine. You're like cross cousin and a parallel. Yeah, Americans don't make a distinction, but it's like your mom's your mom's sister's children are your parallel cousins because mom and sister match. Therefore, cannot marry them. A cross cousin, your mom's brother's kids, nice. They are perfect. They are the spouse you should pursue. Well, when it comes to arranged marriages, the question is kind of like, are they satisfying? It turns out, as we said, many, many, many cultures have these. And what you find is that these arranged marriages, generally speaking, don't start out with love because in many of these arranged marriages, they've never even met each other. Okay. And so what you find here is this, well, this is actually a little bit off to the side, arranged marriages. In China, they've got a situation where women that have passed somewhere around 23 or 24 are referred to as leftover women. Leftover women. And so what happens is the parents of these older children will go to these marriage markets where you can see what they'll do is they'll put their parasols out and then they're going to advertise their children. Okay, and what does my child have to offer? And they're going to make negotiations and arrange the marriage for their children. Well, here in India, there's there's a large variety of marriage styles. Some are arranged and some are more of a love marriage. And what you can see here is that the dashed lines represent the love that people in a love marriage experience. And you see for the first 5 years or so, their love is relatively high. But once you pass the 5 year mark, their love score kind of plunges. But those who are in an arranged marriage, their love score starts quite a bit lower, but you can see it rises with time rather than drops with time. So yeah, arranged marriages tend to be more satisfying on a longer term scale. Um, this was actually pretty interesting little thing. I don't know. I wrote this one time. I was inspired when I was at the international arrivals at the airport, and I was waiting for a flight from Korea to pick somebody up. And this old Korean man gets off the flight, and he kind of walks his way up, and this old Korean woman, and it's very obvious he's been away for quite some time. And he approaches her, and they bow at each other and walk off. What? At least shake hands, right? No, nothing. They bowed at each other. So the very idea of public displays of affection is even quite culturally variable. And in the earliest close relationship that you will have in your lifetime is, of course, the parent and caretaker or child and caretaker relationship. And so I'm sure you must have learned in some psychology course or another about the conception of attachment. That is the biological connection that occurs between an infant and their caregiver, and it's a two-way street. It's quite a two-way street. Well, it turns out that the Western research has developed this research on attachment styles, and they say certain relationships between parents and babies and caregivers is healthy and leads to healthy social development, etc. So if you see in the United States, 67% of the attachment relationships are quote secure, which is supposed to be the healthiest and the best. But you can see in various parts of the world that all of a sudden they're not as common. And it really reminds us of the Western bias in the psychological literature, because according to this, there should be a huge number of Israeli children that should be having serious, serious social issues based on the literature, and they're not. Okay, they're just not. That's just not what's happening. Okay.